Hi, welcome back. Uh, Today is our last video of the semester. I'll be talking about a final exam. All right. So, what is the content that will be covered on final exam? Uh, the content that will be covered on final exam is the second half of the semester. The format of the final exam is exactly the same as it was for all the midterm exams. The final exam will be online, and slightly the window for the final exam is slightly smaller than it was for the midterm exams because by policy we have to have all the final exams completed by uh, end of the final exam week, which is Friday. So the final exam, I will make it available for you from Thursday evening until the midnight of Friday. So keep that in mind that the final exam will be available from around maybe Thursday, um, I would say 6 o'clock until uh, the on next week, Thursday 6 o'clock until uh, the Friday uh, midnight of the Friday. All right. So having said that, we have five chapters: chapter 6, chapter 7, then chapter 9, 10, and 11. All right. So let's begin. In order to do well on final, you have to go through all the lecture materials. Okay. So lecture materials for all the classes, the study guides for uh, both midterm 2 and midterm 3. Those are going to be a big help. Okay, some of the questions for midterm 2 and 3 could be repeated. I'm not sure how many, and some could be extremely brand new questions. So on the final exam, I'm not looking for the depth, but I'm looking for the comprehensive, so breadth. So, and more so, I'm looking at how the knowledge that you gain from the second half of the semester, what do you do with that knowledge, how you apply that knowledge. So there will be some application type questions. So those application types questions can be handled very well if your theory is correct, if you have studied the material and tried to teased out a bit and have dissected it, have digested it, and then you'll be able to answer any question if asked in different ways. So sometimes what happens is that I change a language here and there, and students get confused. So if your basics are correct, if your concepts uh, are ingrained in your mind, then you will be able to handle those type of questions. There will be some. They're not all application type questions. Many are content based questions, very easy, but some are application type questions, and students really have some challenges for it. So I will like you to emphasize that you please read those get those concepts as much um, uh, correct and as possible. All right, so let's begin. What are those concepts? So starting with chapter 6, we talked about different types of classes. Okay, so get to know the different types of classes and know how they're different of metals. So classes of metals, I'm saying. So the first is highly toxic. So that class, those metals affect different types of body systems. Second class is where we have it's slightly less toxic. Those chemicals that are actually essential, but um, uh, when they are in a very high quantity, they are detrimental to health. So a moderate level is required. Third class was about the medication, the metals that are used for medication purposes. All right. So that was the class. Fourth the third class, and fourth class is that it's out of this focus of this semester. So there's a decreasing level of toxicity, and how these classes were, how the heavy metals were classified into these different classes. It was based on frequency, how frequently they are found on these hazardous sites, as well as their toxicity. So accordingly, that those have been added to the hazardous waste sites. Okay, so of course you need to know about bioaccumulation. So what is the bioaccumulation? As increasing as the size of the species increases, the more metal is absorbed in the blood of that organism. The smaller the animal, the smaller the amount of metal that is absorbed in the organism. So it's as you move up the food chain, more absorption of metal. What's methylation? Methylation of mercury is very important. So methylation bacteria, they introduce a methyl group in mercury. So it's methylated mercury, methyl mercury. That is highly toxic compared to the pure mercury. So methylation, and when that toxic mercury bioaccumulates, which means that it's going to cause a lot of adverse health effects, and kids are notoriously affected. Okay, so now what are the routes of exposure? Routes of exposure that we talked about: ingestion, that's from mouth, inhalation, inhale the chemicals, and dermal exposure, that's skin exposure. And which one is fastest, which one is slowest? Dermal is the slowest because 7 layers of skin, hard for the metal to get it into the circulation. Inhalation is the fastest because get into the lungs, from lungs to the heart, and heart pumps everywhere. Ingestion is the in between because it takes 3-4 hours for the chemical to be absorbed in the blood from the stomach. Okay, so then connection between environmental media and routes of exposure. Of course, when you know the routes of exposure, first of all, you need to know the symptoms, gastrointestinal. If there are gastrointestinal symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, which means that the route of exposure is what? Ingestion. So there are metals that really like, the environmental media of water or food. Those are the media that really are loved by metals. Some of the metals, such as arsenic, is commonly found in water than in a gaseous form or dust form. Then mercury and lead, they are commonly found in food. Okay, so like fish. So that's how environmental media you can get. And then briefly know about health effects of lead, mercury, arsenic, zinc, copper, iron, aluminum. So this section, you have to know about some information about the sources and health effects of each of these heavy metals that we discussed, right? So get to know about those. Okay, I'm not going to discuss these into detail because it's going to take a long time. You can go and see the video if you want. You can see the video on chapter 6 to get to know the individual effects of the health effects of the chemical. But I will say that overall, all these health effects, what they have in common, they have common adverse health effects are cancers, then the health effects on adverse pregnancy outcomes, so premature abortion, miscarriage, then developmental toxins. It's going to cause the adverse health effects on developing embryo, fetus. It's going to cause brain problem in fetus, so brain damage, so learning disabilities and things like that, and other types of specific adverse health effects that you can look through. Sources, as we discussed, environmental media. You can see the sources very clearly. Mercury, food is a common source. Lead, food is a common source as well. Paint chips and things like that. For arsenic, water is a common source. Beryllium, air is a common source. Inhalation, um, and you can look at the sources. All right. So then, what is next is the chapter 7 now. So chapter 7, we need to know all about the different classes of pesticides. All right. So I know the peculiarity of each class. So as we discussed, uh, organophosphate is the most prevalent. It's a generalized pesticide instead of specific pesticides such as insecticide, rodenticide, uh, and so on and so forth. So it's a generalized pesticide because it's used for everything, to kill different types of pests. That's we're talking about organophosphate. Then it's uh, degraded into the environment. Uh, so with comfortably, it is not lingering in the environment. It's not persistent organic pollutants. That's why it's safe. The other one is organocarbamate. It degrades into the environment pretty fast. It is also used for different to kill different types of pests. It is not used as frequently as organophosphate. Third one is organochlorides, DDT. They are persistent organic pollutants. They are the most uh, dangerous one actually. Although organophosphate has been frequently used for suicides in developing countries because the availability is universal. So DDT, organochlorides, they linger into the environment. They cannot be destroyed very easily. That's why they're problematic, and at the same time they're toxic as well. The fourth class is a pyrethrin or pyrethroids. Pyrethrins are coming from the natural sources. So the pesticides that we get from natural sources like plants and animals, those are pyrethroids. So these are clear characteristics. Persistent organic pollutant effect that we talked about, the chemicals that cannot be degraded very easily. Know about DDT. DDT was, we talked about this in chapter 7. There was what was a boon to kill malaria parasites in 40s, but it was used extensively till the 70s, and when it was banned, and so much of use of DDT has been done so that all living organisms have some tiny portion of DDT in our blood because it cannot be destroyed very easily. So it has bioaccumulation abilities as well. So that's why it's around. It passes generations as well. Of course, and DDT causes different types of cancers and different types of adverse health effects. You know, stillbirth and miscarriages and things like that. Okay, so pesticides kill the. So, please know how the pesticides kill the pests. That mechanism that I talked about um, is that there is a cholinesterase enzyme. So acetyl and choline are the two chemicals in our they're in our body. I mean, in the parasite's body, pest's body as well. The same thing. So these two chemicals they come together, uh, and then the brain. This is done in order for a brain to send a message to a particular organ or particular skeletal muscle to perform any action. When the brain sends signal for example, to the hand, to my hand, for left hand to lift it. The brain cells, there are a series of neurons that are conducting this, transferring this message, and there is from one neuron to another neuron. So nerve cells. So that message is encrypted in the form of maybe sodium ion or calcium ions. Which is basically a paper. So um, in order for the message to be transferred from one nerve cell to another nerve cell, acetyl and choline, which are the two free-flowing chemicals in our blood, they must come together. So they come together, and then the message is delivered from one cell to another cell. But once the message is delivered, acetylcholine and choline must break apart, um, and that is done by something called cholinesterase enzyme. It breaks them apart, and then the message is delivered, and the brain come to know that the message has been delivered. If they do not, they are separated, then the brain have no clue. The brain thinks that message still hasn't delivered, and it sends another signal. So what happens is that the pesticide, it kills the cholinesterase enzyme, inhibits its activity. So then acetyl and choline are never broken apart. So what happens? So brain keeps sending the signal that so the brain bombards the nerve cells with signals all over again, and that causes a literal nervous breakdown, and then the nervous system collapses. Once that happens, the animal dies. So that's how the pesticides kills the pest. So get this in, get to know that it's inhibition of cholinesterase enzyme. All right. So know about styrene, vinyl chloride, dioxin, and Agent Orange. Styrene is used in plastics, that we know some of the plastics, and it's possible carcinogenic. Vinyl chloride is used to manufacture polyvinyl chloride, which is harmless, our PVC pipes, but polyvinyl chloride is carcinogenic. So in most cases, in PVC factories, the risk to the workers of exposure to polyvinyl or exposure to vinyl chloride is pretty high. It's not as risky for general population because PVC is pretty harmless. But dioxin can cause. It's a group of. It's a family of 419 chemicals. Out of that, 30 are extremely toxic, and others are harmless. So these toxic dioxins can cause different types of skin-related conditions. The that you can see is one of that is chloracne, and it's very bad variety of acne, and different types of skin abnormalities and cancers and things like that. It's a pretty notoriously bad chemical. Um, Dioxin, nobody creates dioxin in the factory. When something is burning, the dioxins are formed. So dioxin is a combustion product. So Agent Orange is was used as a herbicide. Okay, so herbicide is the pest, the pesticide that kills vegetation. So Agent Orange had some dioxin content that caused something called a chemical sensitivity that happened to the soldiers, and all that you can see you can get from the book and from the video from chapter 7. So in short, Agent Orange has a dioxin, and because of that it's harmful to health. Know about endocrine disruption effect from chemicals. So you know that as endocrine disruptors, they are pretty they are the chemicals that can cause hormonal changes in drinking water or wastewater. The wastewater, they are commonly found because people taking pills and drugs and pharmaceuticals and endocrine, all these things, pharmaceutical trash that I would call, that is getting into the wastewater and then in drinking water, and this chemical. So this issue is still under in research. Because of the dilute nature, we still don't know, and there are not many cases that are coming out. So probably it's a very low level of exposure that is not very significant so far. But get to know about endocrine disruption, the hormonal changes, infertility among men and women. In women, there's cancers that can be formed, cancer of ovary and reproductive organs. So that's why endocrine disruptors are not very good, very harmful to health. Chapter 9, that we are talking about different types of applications of environmental health. Chapter 9 talk about different types of drinking water sources. Fresh water. So fresh water is very hard to find. 97 the earth is 70% water, 30% land. Among the water that is available, only 2.5% of that water is fresh water. So 97.5% is not a fresh water, it is ocean water, which is useless. Out of 2.5 that is available, only 1% that you see radially, which is groundwater or the water that is for lakes and rivers and open water bodies. While other freshwater reserves, they are inaccessible. Polar caps, ice caps, or the lakes that are high up in mountains. So you can see the freshwater is not readily available uh, when you take a big picture. Okay. Then the surface water, the freshwater has two types: surface water, groundwater, and there's something called the groundwater under direct influence. So get to know which type requires the intensive treatment. Surface water requires most extensive treatment because it's exposed and it's exposed to different types of contaminant sources. It's out and open. Groundwater is not exposed that much, so that's why it's clean. It's been filtered naturally through different types of layers in the ground, so it's pretty clean. So there is no microbial contamination, but there are some chemicals that still needs to be adjusted. So it requires very minimal level of treatment. Groundwater under direct influence of surface water, it requires moderate level treatment, so not as intensive as surface water, but definitely more than groundwater. So get to know these different levels. Freshwater availability that we talked about, waterborne diseases originated from bacteria. So different types of waterborne diseases that you need to know. Enteropathogens. So enteric bacteria. So cholera has been traditionally the very big killer. Vibrio cholerae is a causative organism and can cause something called rice stool, which means the stool looks like pretty ricey type, like and causes a very severe type of diarrhea. And where basically most children that have died from cholera, they died because of diarrhea rather than the disease itself. So it causes a very high frequency diarrhea, and that causes dehydrations to the extent that it causes renal failure, and that's how the person dies. Cholera, and then get to know some viruses, such as you can look those viruses in chapter 9. Protozoa and parasites. So protozoa, we talked about Giardia lamblia, and we talked about Cryptosporidium. Giardia lamblia is a parasite, can be killed very easily by antiparasitic. Giardia Cryptosporidium is pretty tough to kill. Chlorination doesn't kill it, so it requires additional disinfectants such as ozonation or UV light treatment. Because it's very small, and it forms a cyst, and it's a very tough shell, and so that's why the chlorination is not able to penetrate that shell. And norovirus that we talked about, that is spreads pretty fast on a cruise ship. So if people are having access to having living in a contained area such as a ship, when even one person has infection with norovirus, the person can spread that infection to everybody on the ship in no time. Okay, so you can get to know about these creatures more detail in when you access chapter 9, for example. Sorry. So no gastrointestinal symptoms from vector-borne diseases. So yes, of course, yeah, symptoms that water, diarrhea, cramps in abdomen, cramps in your legs because of dehydration. So those are the symptoms. Of course, know about drinking water treatment. different stages are there. First stage is what, flocculation. So that's bringing the particles, dispersed particles together. These are medium-sized particles, solids, and then they become like these different particles. They come together, they form a flock, and they become heavy, and then because of their weight, they go down. So those particles, as well as the heavy particles, they are scrapped at the bottom, and then the supernatant layer, water layer, is separated, and the bottom layer, where all these particles, the solids are deposited, they are taken out, and really it becomes a sludge, which again the water from that sludge is separated out, and the solids are sent to the landfills. That is flocculation. Sedimentation, which I talked about, is basically just water is just sitting in the sedimentation tank, and the skimmer is there, which is moving on the tank, and it's basically making the heavy particles to settle at the bottom. Rest I already told. Sedimentation, then filtration. Filtration is where the water, the clear water, which is free of most suspended solids and heavy solids. It's pretty watery, pretty liquid. Very high percentage. Only solids that are remaining are very fine, very fine particles, very small particles, which are not able to, we cannot see from naked eye. So they are filtered. So they are filtered. Powerful filters are used. These filters could be sand, gravel, activated carbon. These filters are used. Activated carbon is used to absorb the heavy metals and inorganics, and the other layers are used to filter the fine particles, the small particles. After that, there's a last stage is disinfectant, where the chlorine shot is provided, and there is when the water is out into the distribution system, and at the distribution system in the water towers, another shot of disinfectant is provided. Some facilities, I think most facilities, have a secondary disinfection as well, where water goes through ozonation or UV light treatment in order to kill cryptosporidium. Of course, some utilities also add a fluoride into the water. I mean, all the utilities. That's why tap water has a fluoride, while the bottled water doesn't have fluoride. So make sure that you're using toothpaste that has a fluoride. Otherwise, you will have dental caries. Dental caries is a commonly occurs when you have low fluoride intake. Of course, very high level of fluoride also not good, because it's going to call mottling of teeth. Okay, so then disinfection necessary that we talked about. Water stress, water scarcity. Water stress is when 1,000 cubic meters or less is the what's called the water need, the availability of water to the person is for the country, for example, is less than or at 1,000 cubic meters. For stress, water stress is the availability is only 1,000, from 1,000 to 1,700, so 1,700 cubic meters. So that is extremely small. When you look at the water availability in Canada, it's 14,000. So you can see the difference. It's pretty small. So what's going to happen? There is a permanent water shortages in countries with water scarcity. There's temporary water shortages in countries with water stress. Okay, and then the fossil aquifers. You need to know the fossil aquifers as well. In the Middle East, when it was not hot and dense and a desert type situation millennia of years ago, a lot of water was there was a regular rainfall, and water was stored in the underground. Once all these things were desertified, there are still water reserves. Those are fossil aquifers. They are not. Of course, need to know about what is rechanneling of water. So you need to know about those as well. So fossil aquifers. Chapter 10, we talked about a lot of things about smog. Okay, smog, how it's formed, ozone from the vehicles. It interacts with particles in air, uh, uh, the normal air contents such as oxygen, nitrogen, so on and so forth. Interacts with these contents in air and then forms smog. Smog is an indicator of air quality. A lot of smog, which means bad air quality. Smog, the ozone is also causes a lot of adverse health effects as well. Know about indoor air quality, including proper ventilation. Okay, indoor air quality issues. So improper ventilation, we spend a lot of time in the indoors. Improper ventilation, then faulty ventilation, uh, this type of things where we don't have all the pollutants that are concentrated in the indoor environment. They have no place to go. So what is going to happen? They're going to get into the people's bodies, and then they're going to cause adverse health effects. Uh, Building related illness and sick building syndrome. Of course, know about which one is real and which one is fake, which means which one has a proper diagnosis and proper cause, and which one doesn't have. So get to know about that. You can try, refer to my chapter 10 video for that as well. Smoking and mold. Some mold are toxic, so uh, they can cause toxic and allergies and things like that, such as black mold is very dangerous actually. Indoor smoking is not very good. Smoking can cause a lot of problems, especially secondhand smoke is not good. So there is a ban on indoor smoking anyways on campus as well now in Fresno State, but uh, you know that smoking is pretty injurious to health. Know the mechanism of global warming and its effects on planet. So we now talked about global warming, how it's formed. The um, global warming is coming from the greenhouse gases that are formed from the industries and from the vehicles. They get into the atmosphere, they tear the stratosphere layer by depleting ozone. Then the harmful rays of sun, they come into the planet, so making the planet warm. And also the persistent organic pollutants, so some of the chemicals that are not able to degrade very easily, they linger around or hover around on in the stratosphere, and that's why making everything warm. So that's why in the nights many of the world cities, especially in the tropical areas, they're still warm even in the nights because of the something called a temperature inversion. Okay, so that's how the global warming is happening. What are the effects of global warming? Lots of health effects, changes in the seasons, vectors are there are emerging pathogens because of disease vectors that are being activated because of the changes in environment, and lots of devastating types of health effects. Effects on the planet. Okay, so know about different types of specific pollutants, UV radiation, and how it. So UV radiation is bad, can cause skin cancer, and also can cause diseases of eyes. Um, uh, of course, and you need to have a proper SPF factor to protect your skin. So use a proper skin skin protector from UV radiation. Uh, okay, particular dust sizes. So you know that the particulates or black carbon dust comes in different sizes, right? So these are sizes less than 2.5 microns are these smallest, and they penetrate deeper into the lungs. Slightly is bigger. They're trapped into the upper parts of the respiratory tract, and they cause bronchitis. The one that penetrate deeper into the lungs, they get into the alveoli, and they can cause uh, lung diseases, and then they transfer that disease to the heart, and then we have heart diseases as well. So overall, the cardiac conditions, and that's why the mortality rate from the 2.5 micron and less size particles is pretty high. So get to know about that. The sizes matter very much for the particulates. Um, then radon exposure. You know that radon is a carcinogen, known carcinogen, and it's a silent killer. That what they call, because we cannot see it, we cannot smell it, we cannot we have no idea whether it's around or not. That's why we have radon testing kits. Of course, the deposition of radon is not not the same everywhere. Especially in Iowa, in the middle of the country, the deposits are pretty frequent. So the people who are living over there, they have to have something called sump pumps, so that in the basements the radon is slightly entering into the basement. So people who are spending a lot of time in basements have a higher level of exposure to radon gas. So sump pump is going to uh, pump that radon that is in the basements into the outside environment. So some pumps are important for that. Uh, and then carbon monoxide and carboxyhemoglobinemia. Uh, Carbon monoxide is has a very high affinity to RBCs, red blood cells. So it reaches to the red blood cells before oxygen reaches, and then that's how it deprives the cells of oxygen. So the person is starving for oxygen, and what happens is that because of the person, there is a very good chance that person can die from suffocation. Uh, so that's why you have to have a proper ventilation, especially the carbon monoxide is coming from the cars. So always do not keep the car running while there is no ventilation, while the car garage is closed. Otherwise, you will accumulate the carbon monoxide, and you will have a lightheadedness, and carbon monoxide will get into the brain, and the brain would suffer from the lack of oxygen. So open the ventilation, and things will be in control. Who is protected from using air pollution? Okay, primary standards and secondary standards. Primary standards are for people who are uh, sensitive, asthmatics, and have lung diseases and things like that. Secondary standards are for protection of property. Okay, this is all about chapter 10. Chapter 11, last chapter. Know about a foodborne outbreak, which and the exception. Exception is Clostridium botulism, where only one person, when it's affected by a Clostridium botulism, is considered an outbreak. Otherwise, two or three people is considered when are affected when they eat from the same restaurant, and which is the same cause, and they get sick. It's an outbreak. Because Clostridium botulism is so dangerous, we have that exception. Uh, Pathogen sources, foodborne pathogens, and health effects. So we talked about E. coli, we talked about Clostridium botulism, we talked about Clostridium perfringens, we talked about Streptococcus. Okay, so these are the bacteria that we talked about. Know about good bacteria and bad bacteria. Good bacteria, they are helpful for our digestion and retention of water. Bad bacteria takes their place, kill them, and cause adverse health effects, such as gastrointestinal illnesses. And E. coli can cause the bloody diarrhea. So that's why it's dangerous, and person can die from that shock. Shock that comes after the bloody diarrhea. Um, Clostridium is a potent neurotoxin and can kill the person, make the person paralyzed. Um, then we have Streptococcus, Streptococcus which can cause which is normally it is a resident of nasal uh, passages, the mucosa of upper respiratory system. That's a good one. So, but then the bad variety can cause a problem uh, to the upper respiratory tract, and that's why we have sometimes we have strep throat. That is because of a streptococcus infection. The bad variety is taking place of good one. Um, and then we have some of these are extremely resistant to high temperatures. The streptococcus is extremely resistant to high temperatures. Otherwise, most of bacteria can be handled very well with the good proper temperatures for cooking. Uh, get to know about these in more detail. For viruses, HAV, hepatitis A virus, it's transfer when food hygiene is not followed. First transfer person to person. Health effects, know about parasites. We talked about the worms. Taenia saginata, Taenia solium, and Trichinella, Taenia saginata and Taenia solium, coming from undercooked meat. And Trichinella is coming from same undercooked meat, and Trichinella can the worms can be situated in the muscle, and the adults they grow in the intestines. Saginata solium they are in the intestines. The tapeworms they are also in intestines, and they can grow up to like 6 feet to 7 feet, 20 feet sometimes. So and they're coiled, and they're sucking all the nutrients, and depriving the person from getting nutrients. So they are really a parasites. So albendazole is a drug, anti-helminthic drug, which can be easily used. Prions is a protein-like creatures. They can cause a mad cow disease called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is holds to the cow brain, and cow dies. Human variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease can have similar features, and agricultural workers they have high risk for that to develop that. Toxins, we have different types of toxins that are coming when the food is just sitting. Uh, and also some toxins are found in some sort of food varieties such as mushrooms, fish. So watch about that, because some of them can cause paralysis, some of them can cause adverse health effects. Know about the type of additives, functions of the additives. Three types of additives: incidental, malicious, and accidental. Incidental are the one that we are using the additives. Um, so to improve the food quality, what it does arrests microbial growth, and also prevents exit of the vitamins and nutrients from the food in outside environment, and prevents formation of toxins in the food, thereby improving the food quality. Delaney clause and GRAS rule. So get to know about the Delaney clause. Um, it was repealed in 1996 Act. It was introduced in 1958 Act. So the cause of Delaney clause was that um, there are uh, no additive with any risk of causing cancer should be added. So there is practically very few of those that were in place. In 1996, a new rule came, like additives that are generally regarded as safe, which means they have caused very negligible cases, like one case per million or something like that. Uh, those can be allowed to remain as an additive. So that's why we have GRAS rule. Safe temperature zone 40 degrees Fahrenheit, less than 40 degrees, and greater than 140 degrees are safe zone, safe temperature zone. So 40 degrees and more for cold food, and 140 degrees and less for hot food. They are dangerous, dangerous temperature zones. In these 40 to 140 the food is definitely going to spoil. So make sure that the temperatures are maintained. Cross contamination, when one food item is contaminated, if you're using that contamination can be spread to another food item when same pots and pans and cutting boards and knives are used. So make sure that you use different pots and pans and cutting boards and knives for different food items, so that the contamination can be contained only to that particular food item. How food pollution can become protected. So food safety. So there are four things that you need to know: proper cooking temperatures, proper chilling temperatures, uh, and then avoid cross contamination, which I had discussed just now, and then have a proper hygiene, so hand washing and all these things. Know about cold pasteurization. Sometimes there is something called irradiation of food, where the UV food is of how food passes through UV light radiation in order to kill the residual pathogens. If there are pathogens that are in the food, they will be destroyed by that. It's called cold pasteurization. Know about HACCP, hazardous control critical control points. So these are the procedure. This is a system that exists in 1950s. This system is designed to find out the vulnerable points at which the vulnerable points at these series of events, from food harvesting until the food is sent in the retail for selling. Uh, the food the food the food uh, preparation or food processing and food sell, all these events. There are critical control points, how to manage those critical control points and how to act on how to make sure that no contamination occurs in these critical control points. That is the system HACCP. So overall, try to give as much summary as possible. I'm sorry about this is the longest video of all. Uh, so it's a 47-minute lecture. I guess that is helpful. I'm sorry that it's so long, but considering that there are 5 chapters and these concepts are very important to know, I try to help as much as possible. Um, thank you for your support for the semester, and I understand that it was a lot of material, and most of you guys are not environmental health or public health majors, and you showed a lot of interest in the course, and I'm very thankful for that. And I wish you all the best in your not just for this class, not only for your program, but your overall educational life and over your personal life. And good luck, and um, uh, you guys have very happy holidays. Thank you so much.